The train rumbled steadily down the tracks, its rhythmic motion lulling most passengers into a quiet calm. But near the front, tension hung thick in the air. A wealthy businessman gripped his pregnant wife's trembling hand, his knuckles white with fear as she gasped for breath. Her face was pale, her body weak, and every second felt like an eternity. Over the intercom, the conductor's voice crackled with urgency, calling out for a doctor or nurse, anyone with medical experience, to come forward. The silence that followed was deafening. People glanced around, some frowning, some whispering, but no one moved. Then, from the back of the train, a figure rose, a teenage boy in a worn-out jacket, his eyes calm but focused, quietly stepped into the aisle. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He simply walked, as if he knew this was where he was meant to be. When he reached the anxious couple, he looked at the woman, then turned to the man and said gently but firmly, "Let me try." The other passengers watched, unsure what to expect. Just minutes earlier, many hadn't even noticed the boy sitting among them, but now all eyes were on him. What happened next would not only save a life, but would reveal a truth that left even the wealthiest man in the room in tears. Before we continue with this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing your thoughts. Jaden sat alone near the back of the dimly lit train car, a threadbare hoodie pulled tightly around his shoulders as the train rumbled steadily through the night. Outside the window, snow flurries danced against the darkened sky, and the city lights of Chicago slowly faded into the distance. He didn't look like much, just another teenage kid, slouched in his seat, silent, forgotten. But there was a weight in his eyes, the kind that only comes from growing up too fast. At 17, Jaden had already lived a life many couldn't imagine. He never knew his father, not even a name, not even a memory. His mother had passed away when he was only 9, leaving him adrift from one foster home to another. Some placements were kind, most were not. But the last one, that one had finally broken something in him. He hadn't spoken about it, not to anyone. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just packed what Louie had. A few clothes, a worn-out backpack, and a folded photograph of his mother smiling with tired eyes, and he left. No one tried to stop him. He bought the cheapest ticket he could find, an overnight train from Chicago to New York. No plan, no friends, no destination, really. Just a hope that maybe, just maybe, things would be different on the other side. Jaden kept his head low, watching passengers settle into their seats. Businessmen on laptops, mothers with restless toddlers, an elderly couple reading quietly across the aisle. He didn't belong here, not really, but he was used to that. He shifted uncomfortably and pulled out the old photo from his pocket. His fingers traced the edges of the image. His mother holding him as a baby, her smile strained but warm. That photo had followed him to every home, every shelter. Every night he had to remind himself to survive one more day. In the silence, his stomach growled, but he ignored it. The last thing he'd eaten was a granola bar he saved from the shelter 2 days ago. There was food being passed around by the train staff up front, but it wasn't for someone like him. Not without money, not without a seat in the fancy section. Still, Jaden didn't complain. He never did. He just watched, quietly, always watching. And when others fell asleep or scrolled through their phones, Jaden listened. He heard everything. The hushed arguments, the laughter, the pain behind people's eyes. That was his gift, though he never called it that. People had always underestimated him. Too small, too quiet, too black, too poor. But Jaden had learned long ago, when the world doesn't see you, it's easier to move through it. It's easier to help when no one expects you to. And that night, as the train rolled deeper into the darkness, Jaden had no idea that fate was about to test him in ways he'd never imagined. He wasn't running anymore. He was on a path that would change his life, and someone else's forever. In the plush silence of the first-class cabin, Evelyn adjusted her silk scarf and shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The hum of the train vibrated beneath her, but it wasn't a movement that unsettled her. It was the tightness in her chest, the gnawing nausea rising again. She placed a gentle hand over her swollen belly, breathing through the discomfort as her other hand clutched a bottle of sparkling water. Evelyn was the picture of grace, even in discomfort. Late 30s, impeccably dressed, her features soft yet striking, the kind of woman people notice without quite knowing why. Her designer handbag rested neatly beside her, along with a leather-bound planner full of appointments she'd canceled last minute. A business delay had forced her onto the train instead of the private jet she and her husband typically used. And while the staff had tried to make her feel welcome, nothing about this trip felt right. The young conductor approached with a polite smile, offering her a warm towel. Evelyn managed to thank you, her voice still cultured but tinged with exhaustion. "I'm all right," she said, with a tight smile. "Just a little overwhelmed, I suppose." She didn't say how much the smell of the train food was turning her stomach, or how the distant crying of a baby in another cabin made her heart race. She didn't say how much she missed home, her bed, or the calming scent of her husband's cologne. She simply sat there, smoothing down her dress and pretending everything was under control. A moment later, her phone buzzed. She answered quickly. "I'm okay, darling," she said softly, her eyes fluttering shut as she heard her husband's voice on the other end. "Just a little nauseous. I'll be there by morning." "I can't wait to see you. And I think he can't wait either," she added, patting her belly gently with a smile. But after the call ended, her eyes lingered on the crowd beyond the glass divider. The first-class section was peaceful, but she could hear the echo of laughter and shouts drifting in from the lower cars. People moving, people rushing, people she didn't know. She wasn't used to this, being alone in a public space. Vulnerable. The train jolted slightly, and her body tensed. Her eyes scanned the crowd beyond her cabin door. A teenager in baggy clothes walked by. A man argued with someone over phone. A group of teens laughed loudly down the hall. She shifted again. Her breath quickened. Evelyn wasn't scared exactly, but this wasn't her world. She had spent years in gated communities, escorted by drivers, protected by routines. Now, miles from home, with her unborn son pressing against her ribs, she was surrounded by strangers, motion, and uncertainty. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Just a few more hours. You're okay. Breathe." But even she couldn't ignore the tension crawling up her spine. Something didn't feel right. The train hummed steadily as it curved along a narrow bridge, the steel wheels screeching softly against the rails. Inside, passengers swayed slightly, gripping armrests and adjusting their posture to match the motion. Jaden shuffled down the narrow corridor, his worn sneakers barely making a sound on the floor. His backpack hung loosely off one shoulder, and the sleeves of his hoodie were pulled over his hands. He wasn't supposed to be walking to the first-class car. His cheap ticket had assigned him a seat far in the back. But he had wandered forward looking for a quieter spot, somewhere to breathe, somewhere to think, somewhere he wouldn't feel so invisible. As he passed, his eyes met Evelyn's. She noticed him, not with fear or judgment, but with a soft curiosity. Her lips curled into a faint, exhausted smile. Jaden hesitated, then reached into the side of his backpack, pulling out a half-full water bottle. Without saying a word, he offered it to her. Evelyn blinked, surprised, but touched by the gesture. She took it with a nod. "Thank you," she murmured. Jaden gave a small shrug, as if to say it was nothing, then kept walking. A few steps later, he stopped, as if something told him not to go too far. Then the train jerked. A sudden, sharp jolt as it hit a bend on the old bridge. Luggage clattered in the overhead racks. Passengers gasped, grabbing for support. And Evelyn, her eyes widened, her breath caught. She clutched her belly and let out a strangled gasp. Then she collapsed. The water bottle hit the ground and rolled under the seat. A piercing scream echoed through the car. "Help! Oh, God, help!" Evelyn cried, her voice raw with panic and pain as she writhed on the floor, clutching her stomach. Her hands trembled. Her face went pale. The pain hit in waves, fast, sharp, relentless. Everything stopped. People froze. No one moved. A woman in the front covered her mouth. A man across the aisle slowly stood, phone in hand, but only to start recording. A teenager whispered, "What's going on?" as another pulled out their phone too, eyes wide. But no one got close. No one reached for her hand. No one checked if she could breathe. The first-class cabin, once calm and composed, was now a pressure cooker of fear and confusion. But fear had a funny way of paralyzing people. And in the middle of it all, Evelyn screamed again, louder this time, desperate. The sound tore through the silence. Her baby was coming, too early, too fast. And no one was helping. Without thinking, Jaden sprinted back toward the first-class cabin. His backpack hit his side as he ran, but he didn't stop. His eyes locked on Evelyn, who was now slumped sideways, her body trembling as she fought the pain. He dropped to his knees beside her. Her breathing was erratic. Tears streaked down her cheeks. Her hands were still clutching her belly. Jaden looked up and saw the red emergency intercom beside the door. He lunged for it and pressed hard. "We need medical help in the first-class car. Pregnant woman collapsing. Please, someone respond." His voice was sharp, clear, no hesitation. The conductor's voice crackled back, uncertain. Stand by, help is..." Jaden didn't wait. He turned back to Evelyn, laying her gently on her side. "Ma'am, I need you to breathe with me, okay? In and out, he whispered, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. She nodded faintly, sweat pooling at her hairline. Jaden pulled off his hoodie and folded it under her head. "I've got you," he said. "You're not alone." The crowd around them still hadn't moved. Then Jaden began to act. His hands worked methodically. He checked her pulse, counted her breathing. He remembered what Ms. Renee, the retired nurse from his last group home, used to say: "Keep the mother calm. Watch for the contractions. And if you ever have to deliver, you do it like a lifeguard saving a life, gently but without fear." He pulled a clean shirt from his backpack and tucked it under her. Evelyn let out a sob. Her body jolted. Her eyes fluttered. Jaden grasped her hand tightly. "Stay with me. Just look at me, okay?" One of the train staff members stepped closer, watching with wide eyes. "Are you a doctor?" he stammered. Jaden didn't look up. "No, but I know what to do. So help me or move aside." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. The others stepped back, and Jaden kept going. But Evelyn's body began to weaken. Her strength was fading fast. Her grip loosened. "Ma'am, stay with me. Please," Jaden said, leaning in close. "You're going to meet your baby. You're going to make it. Just breathe." Her eyes met his, full of pain, full of fear, but something else too, trust. Then she passed out. Her head rolled to the side. Jaden's breath caught in his throat. No, come on," he shouted, shaking her gently. "You can't give up. Not now." He held her hand tighter. His other hand pressed to her belly. "I promised I wouldn't let anything happen to you." And he meant it. 5. Emergency response, 25:00, 30:00. Narrator's voice. Outside, the train screeched to a stop. A small rural station, barely more than platform and shack, loomed outside the window. The conductor had ordered an emergency halt. The doors flung open, and the cold night air rushed in. Red and blue lights flickered in the distance. Sirens. Paramedics ran on board, pushing the crowd that had finally begun to react. "She's in here," Jaden shouted, waving his arm. The paramedics rushed in and dropped beside Evelyn. Questions fired at him. Vitals, how long she'd been out, what she'd said. Jaden answered everything, calm and precise. They stabilized her quickly. Oxygen mask. 4 monitors. Hands moving fast. "Who's the next of kin?" one asked. "She's traveling alone," Jaden said, breathless. "Are you family?" Jaden hesitated. Then he shook his head. "I'm just someone who couldn't watch her die." The paramedic stared at him for a beat, then nodded. "Ride with us." Jaden climbed into the back of the ambulance, holding her hand once more as they sped into the darkness. She stirred as they turned a corner, her eyes fluttering open for just a moment. She looked at Jaden. So weak, but so clear. "Tell him," she whispered, her voice like paper. "The boy saved us." Then her head fell back, and the sirens wailed louder. The hospital doors burst open with a loud hiss as a tall, sharply dressed man stormed to the emergency wing. His coat flew behind him, his polished shoes echoing against the cold tile. Charles Montgomery. The name alone turned heads. Billionaire, venture capitalist, media magnate, a man used to controlling everything in his orbit. But not tonight. Tonight, his world was unraveling. Where is she? Charles barked at the nurse behind the counter. Where's my wife, Evelyn Montgomery? The nurse looked up calmly. Already briefed. Room 4C. They're stabilizing her now. The baby's okay. Charles didn't wait to hear more. He stormed down the hallway, heart racing, hands trembling slightly. Something he hadn't felt in years. When he reached the room, he stopped. There, sitting beside Evelyn's hospital bed, was a teenage boy. His clothes were rumpled and faded, his sneakers scuffed, his hands still stained faintly from dried blood and panic. His fingers were wrapped gently around Evelyn's, never letting go. Jaden. Charles's eyes narrowed instantly. His voice was sharp and accusatory. Who are you? What are you doing here? Jaden looked up, startled, his body tense, and for a moment that old instinct to run surged through him again. But he didn't move. He stayed by Evelyn's side. A nurse stepped between them, lifting her hand gently. Sir, please, this young man saved your wife's life. Charles blinked. What? He stayed with her until we arrived, kept her stable, kept her calm. She wouldn't have made it to this hospital without him. The nurse said firmly, neither would your daughter. Then the door opens, and everything stills. Charlotte Vexler walks in, alone, no guards, no assistants. Just her, and that sharp-eyed presence she wears like armor. The security men rise. She motions for them to leave. They do. She sits across from Jace, folds her hands neatly, and studies him for a long moment. The ticking clock on the wall is the only sound. 14. Emotional breakdown 52:00. 56:00. At first, Jay says nothing. He stares down at the table, eyes rimmed red, jaw clenched so hard it hurts. Then, finally, his voice breaks loose. I didn't want to cause trouble. She listens. I just wanted to fix planes. That's it. His voice cracks, and he blinks fast. Since I was a kid, I'd sit in my window and watch them fly over the apartment roofs. I'd take apart fans just to see how they worked. I learned torque settings before I knew how to drive. He pauses, breathes hard. But it doesn't matter what I know. People don't see me. They see a janitor, a kid, a black kid, maybe a liar, maybe a problem. Charlotte doesn't interrupt. Her expression doesn't shift, but her eyes stay locked on him. My dad was a welder. He got arrested for something he didn't do. Spent a year fighting to prove it. Still lost his job. My mom, 3 jobs. I barely see her. She's always tired. But she believes in me. They both do. He looks up finally. Into her eyes. I'm maybe invisible, but I see everything. And I saw what he did. Silence. Not awkward. Heavy. Then Charlotte nods slowly, as if something inside her, something mechanical and ancient, has just clicked into place. Outside that small room, her world is already moving. Investigators swarm the hangar. Mechanics recheck every log, every bolt, every line of code. Then it comes in confirmation from her trusted lead investigator. The auxiliary fuel system was rigged to malfunction mid-flight. Had the flight taken off, it would have stalled over the Atlantic. No signal, no landing, no second chances. Jace was right. And Mr. Delroy? Gone. Security footage shows him leaving the premises 20 minutes after the boarding was canceled. He took nothing, left no message, just vanished into the night. Charlotte reads the full report in silence, lips pressed in. Later that evening, she returns to the room. She doesn't smile. She doesn't soften. But she looks at Jace, truly looks at him, and says, "You saved lives today." He exhales, the tension still gripping his chest. It's not pride he feels. Not yet. It's relief. But somewhere in the back of his mind, that invisible kid finally begins to believe. Maybe he's not so invisible anymore. By morning, the story is everywhere. Teen janitor saves billionaire and international dignitaries from sabotage jet. 16-year-old trainee prevents catastrophic crash. Invisible hero. Young man's courage exposes dangerous plot. News trucks line the edge of the airfield. Cameras scan the tarmac where just hours before, a plane nearly took off to its death. Microphones get shoved in faces. Reporters yell over each other. The world suddenly wants to know, who is Jace Moreno? But Charlotte Vexler gives no interviews, no press conferences. Her company releases a single statement. Due to the bravery and integrity of one of our youngest team members, lives were spared. We stand by him. She shields Jace from the circus, calls off PR handlers who wanted to script his image. No stage photo ops. No interviews in suits too big for him. She tells her inner circle plainly, he's a mechanic in training, not a product. And yet, the world sees him now, truly sees him. No longer the boys sweeping up oil in the background. Just as the buzz begins to quiet, a deeper truth rips open. An internal audit, launched by Charlotte herself, reveals more than anyone expected. Delroy hadn't acted alone. Encrypted messages, payment trails, hidden repair logs across multiple hangars. It all pointed to something bigger. A coordinated effort funded by a rival aviation mogul trying to undermine Charlotte's reputation before the Geneva summit. The plane wasn't the only target. A pattern of quiet sabotage stretched back months. Small failures timed to build doubt in her brand. But this time, they miscalculated. They didn't plan on a boy with callous hands and sharp eyes, catching what their spreadsheets couldn't. Charlotte is furious, but focused. She calls it what it is: treason, corporate espionage, attempted murder. She vows to clean house from the top down, and she keeps her word. Executives are removed, internal systems overhauled, security tightened. And when she's asked privately why she's going to such lengths, she answers simply, because a teenager noticed what a room full of adults missed. I owe him, and I won't let him down. 1 week later, Jay stands outside the Atlanta Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. In his hand, a full-ride scholarship offer, tuition, housing, tools, mentorship. No loans, no fine print, just a signature and a future rewritten. Charlotte personally sponsors it, not just out of gratitude, but belief, quiet, unshakable belief. And that's not all. At her headquarters, a new internship program is launched. Jace is the first name on the roster, not honorary, not symbolic. Real hours, real work, real flight systems under his fingers. When he walks into the hangar now, people look up, they greet him, they ask his opinion. He still wears the same old boots, still keeps his head low when he concentrates. But now, people listen when he speaks. And for the first time, Jace doesn't feel like he's on the outside looking in. He's in the room. He earned it. He saved lives, told the truth, stood alone and didn't back down. And the world? It finally made room for someone like him. Weeks later, before sunrise once again, the same hangar breathes with quiet light. But now, Jace walks through its doors not as a ghost in overalls, but in crisp uniform blues, his ID badge clipped proudly to his chest. It bears his name in bold letters, Jace Moreno, engineering intern. He moves through the rows of aircraft with a quiet steadiness, not seeking attention, but no longer shrinking from it either. Where once eyes slid past him, now they meet us with a nod, some subtle, some warm. The old crew members, men who once grumbled past him or barely noticed his presence, give him space and respect. He opens a maintenance panel on a smaller test aircraft. A fuel sensor isn't reading right. He kneels, tools in hand. No one hovers. No one second guesses. He diagnoses, adjusts, rewires. Efficient, smooth. His fingers no longer hesitate. There's a confidence in his rhythm now, a calm certainty. He stands, wipes his hands, and logs a fix into the system. For the first time, this hangar doesn't feel like borrowed ground. It feels like his own. Outside the hangar, Charlotte Vexler readies her jet, once again bound for Geneva. But this time, things are different. Her eyes scan the tarmac until she sees him. Jace approaches with steady steps, holding something in his palm. She smiles and wraps him in a brief but genuine hug. It's not for the cameras. There are none. You remind me why I started all this, she says softly. Sometimes it takes the smallest voice to stop the biggest fall. He says little, just presses a folded note into her hand. She reads it silently. Fly safe. The skies listen more than people do. Jace. Charlotte smiles, then boards her jet. Jace watches the engines roar to life. This time he's not afraid. He knows what he's doing, and he trusts himself. The world moves forward, and so does Jace. Quick flashes build a quiet legacy. Jace in a classroom, surrounded by blueprints and equations, sleeves rolled up deep in design. A worn but framed newspaper clipping on his bedroom wall. Youngest licensed aircraft mechanic in U.S. history. A scholarship certificate, signed by Charlotte herself. Footage of Jace on a podium at a youth aviation conference, speaking to students about truth, courage, and precision. A hangar plaque unveiled in his honor, in recognition of integrity that soar higher than fear. Then Jace in his mid-20s, walking through a clean room at a top aerospace engineering firm. On the screen behind him, a 3D prototype of a safer, smarter auxiliary fuel system. His name flashes in the patent credits. One final image. Jace on a quiet rooftop at night, looking up at the stars. He closes his eyes, takes a breath, and for the first time, the sky doesn't feel so far away. It feels like home. The sun sinks low over the horizon, painting the runway in deep gold and soft amber. Planes in the distance ascend into the evening sky, their silhouettes cutting through the last light of day. Jay stands still at the edge of the tarmac, hands in his pockets, the wind brushing gently against his uniform. He doesn't move. He watches the aircraft climb, each one a reminder how far he's come and how far he'll go. There's no crowd around him, no fanfare, just him, the runway, and the fading sun. They told me to stay quiet, that no one would believe me, that I was too young, too small, too invisible. But I saw something, and I chose to speak. It saved more than one life that day. It saved mine too, because for the first time, I wasn't just watching the world fly by. I found my wings. The camera slowly pulls back as Jace turns and walks toward the hangar, his step steady, his future open. The screen fades to black. The hum of a jet engine echoes faintly.